Though most of us only think of the regular passenger jets that most of us have seen and traveled on, the world of aircraft is much more bizarre than you might expect. The ability to fly around the world in a matter of hours has completely transformed human life. Today, the furthest place is only a day away, and as a result, the world has shrunk and expanded at the same time. Here are 10 airplanes you won't believe exist. Number 10. This is the tiniest jet-powered aircraft ever produced. The XF-85 Goblin was a tiny plane that resembled a parasite. It was meant to be carried by the B-36 bomber and used in case the larger, heavier aircraft needed to be defended against attack. The Goblin could be launched from the bomb bay and sent into combat with an enemy aircraft that was attacking. This was all well and good, but the small plane was only effective at being released and not so good at being recovered. The Goblin, once again lacking landing gear, meant that if it was released, the mother ship, the B-36, would have to haul it back in using a hook and trapeze. This proved to be a much easier said than done maneuver, but the biggest challenge in this process was that the tiny plane was jostled around so much by turbulence from the larger jet that it was nearly impossible to hook it back in. After 7 test flights of the B-36 and its small companion, the XF-85 Goblin, there were only 3 successful connections between the plane and the trapeze. As a result, the project would be abandoned, and the Goblin was never launched. Number 9. Although Italy is known for its elegance and flawless design, the country's early days of aviation were not the best. The Stepa Caproni is essentially a cartoon plane, but it appears that it is capable of taking off, though it might be slightly embarrassing to be seen doing so. The plane also has a small issue with fascism. In 1932, Mussolini's fascist government was determined to brag about how advanced Italian technology was. They financed the creation of this oddity since jet engines were the newest technology in aviation at the time. Luigi Stepa was responsible for the creation of this amusingly tubby tiny aircraft, which is known as the flying barrel for obvious reasons. His concept essentially consisted of a huge tube with a propeller on the front that was left open at the front and back to resemble a barrel. Despite the design's ability to fly, the test pilot claimed that it lacked mobility. Once more, it's just a barrel, and in the end, it wasn't selected for production because it wasn't any more effective than the current modern aircraft. But hey, what can you expect when trying to fly a barrel? Number 8. The Ankor Kunov in 225 Mariah is the largest aircraft in history. It was a massive cargo plane that could carry up to 250 tons of cargo at a time. Measuring over 275 feet long and weighing 175 tons before any cargo was loaded, only one of these enormous machines was ever completed. It has since been destroyed after its final flight. No more of these machines exist at all. With 6 turbofan engines, 20 steerable wheels in the 32-wheel landing gear, 4 steerable wheels in the nose, and an additional 8 in the rear, this enormous aircraft made its international debut in 1989 at the Paris Air Show, sporting the very shuttle of the Soviet space shuttle program. It was the least subdued display of arrogance that has ever been seen. Putting the largest aircraft in the world and an advanced space exploration program on show is undoubtedly one way to make a statement. Regardless of your efforts, this message could not be missed. Number 7. From one spaceship carrier to another, this time it's the SuperGuppy, a plane specifically designed to transport space goods or even entire aircraft. In the 1960s, the US and the USSR were engaged in a bloody Cold War over dominating space travel, so it became imperative to be able to move massive amounts of space equipment across the US federal government. The first Guppy in the series was the so-called pregnant Guppy. This name came from the airplane's resemblance to the guppy fish, which gives birth rather than lays eggs. Later on, those crazy engineers and all of their ideas would develop the SuperGuppy and iron out the issues of the original, allowing for the transportation of the enormously proportioned parts for NASA in the big belly of the aircraft. They had to accomplish this as quickly and efficiently as possible because the space race felt real and every second really did count. It was a functional aircraft, but it has always required more skillful pilots than a typical aircraft, so anytime it takes off, a specialized crew must be hired. It's also difficult to get the aircraft into the air and securely land it again. Number 6. The Boeing X48 is an unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, which is essentially a spy plane without really revealing its identity. However, this futuristic-looking object is reportedly intended to study the characteristics of the blended wing-body style of aircraft. Interestingly, the UAV was purportedly intended to be used as a passenger aircraft, but the military is now exploring the possibility of using it for their needs. Who would have guessed it? The X48 is a fully modern aircraft made of incredibly light composite materials. It is designed for maximum aerodynamic efficiency and the highest operating capabilities. It can also be controlled remotely, negating the need for a pilot. It is also incredibly fuel efficient and eerily quiet, all characteristics that would be completely superfluous for a spy plane, you know? Number 5. These minuscule light aircraft are commonly utilized for personal and modest commercial purposes, as well as for training novice pilots. Although the Cessna Skyhawk SP isn't the most exciting or dynamic aircraft, it serves its mission well enough that it has been in production since 1955. The United States Armed Forces use a military version of the aircraft for their own training because it's the preferred training aircraft. When you witness a scoundrel fleeing from a distant airstrip in a film, or even a drug lord evading extradition, it's quite probable that the light aircraft they're using for the maneuver is a Cessna Skyhawk. Undoubtedly, the Skyhawk is a 4-seat aircraft with the capacity for 1 or 2 pilots. Its single turboprop design makes it straightforward but efficient. It has been one of the most successful aircraft models ever, with Cessna having supplied over 45,000 of them to date. Number 4. There's a notion that these large Boeing cargo planes must possess some unique or even magical qualities just by their name. The term Dreamlifter sounds beautiful, so what are these products exactly, and can they really live up to that name? Well, certainly not exactly, but these are huge, contemporary freight planes built by one of the aviation industry's titans. In fact, Boeing created these enormous aircraft to assist their own project, the Dreamliners. Due to the fact that the parts for those aircraft were being manufactured everywhere from Italy to Japan, Boeing was having a lot of logistical problems. As a result, the company decided to develop the 747 Dreamlifter, converting existing 747 400s into enormous cargo haulers that were designed to carry the parts for the new aircraft, namely the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. So these enormous flying ships were able to deliver enormous amounts of essential gear to areas where it was most needed, which was a very good thing indeed. In 2020, these aircraft were put into service in order to deliver the massive quantities of pay that were then suddenly required all over the place. They carried and distributed tons of supplies and materials that were needed in the global health crisis that hit in the spring of that year. Number 3. It turns out that the logistical challenges of manufacturing aircraft mean that many of the larger companies must move their own components and large bits and pieces around the world in the process of building their own. These manufacturing needs have led to the design and development of several of the aircraft that we've seen so far. Airbus developed this large, antiquated aircraft as their answer to the SuperGuppy of the past. It's a thrill a minute, isn't it? So many modern aircraft seem to be built entirely in service of building more aircraft. Open up a big fat plane, and inside there's a slightly smaller one and then another and another, until you realize this is just like a massive scale Russian nesting doll situation. Currently, 4 out of the 5 of these belugas are in service for the company to support the manufacturing process by transporting large sections of the assembled fuselage and the wings of various aircraft in its large interior. The 5th beluga in the fleet is a backup for Airbus. Number 2. Here we have something truly mind-boggling, NASA's Helios prototype. After a long history of somewhat ordinary-looking, if not significant, aircraft, known simply as ERAST, this unmanned remotely piloted aircraft was created as part of NASA's Environmental Research Aircraft and Sensor Technology project. Its unique purpose is to demonstrate sustained flight at an altitude of approximately 100,000 feet, with the ability to fly non-stop for at least 24 hours. The overall goal is to see if this remote flight device can withstand 14 hours of continuous flight above 50,000 feet. Up until now, you may have been able to accept that most of the other planes on the list are real, and you may even have flown in some of them. However, this one, well, it's insane and kind of unbelievable, is really worth testing. What do you think of it, and what rationale does NASA have for needing to fly so high and so low? Please share your insightful opinions in the comments section below. Number 1. Known as the Flying Wings or Bat Bombers, the XB-49 and XB-35 bomber aircraft were created during the 1940s. The project was not long-lived, and the aircraft were eventually wrecked in 1953. The sole surviving proof of their existence is currently found in old movies and photos. There are no examples of them left in the world. The Northrop YB-49 flying wing, which served as the model for the B-2 stealth bomber, was intended to cut through the air with up to 32,000 horsepower when the right circumstances were met. The problem was that, despite the B-49's apparent aerodynamics, test pilots found it exceedingly difficult to fly and unstable during bombing missions. The pilot had to constantly maintain control over the aircraft, and it was nearly impossible to maintain constant airspeeds and altitude. None of these problems were particularly ideal for an aircraft, much less one that could carry nuclear weapons, so it may have been best to scrap the flying wings. After all, who wants to see a big, heavy bomb hanging precariously from the sky? And there you have it, a comprehensive assortment of aircraft that differed in terms of size, shape, and purpose. However, could you really believe that they existed, and did any of them truly blow your mind? As always, please share your thoughts and brilliant ideas in the space provided below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more. See you later.